Well, here I am again, George Gruhn, Gruhn Guitars, January 22nd, 2021. And in the last week, quite a bit has happened, as obviously folks are aware, so far as our political scene. The world is rapidly evolving. We have a newly sworn in president and vice president. And in a fortified DC, it went smoothly enough. But that doesn't mean that everybody is all of a sudden lovey-dovey happy so far as total cooperation in Congress, but we'll see what develops. At least some of it looks hopeful. So I'll leave it at that because we don't control that, but guitars still sell. Also going on right now is instead of a NAMM show, National Association of Music Merchants in Anaheim, California, they're having a virtual show online, and that is something that is free and open to the public, easy enough to check up on that. And some of you may find that of interest because you don't have to be a music store owner to sign in. It's something that is free, and you can visit websites, but also hear seminars, lectures, performances, all sorts of stuff going on right now online with NAMM. So there's plenty going on. We have a goodly number of listener questions, and I certainly invite more. So if you wish to submit a question, that's pretty self-evident how to do it. And I'll get to as many as possible, and those that I can't get to, I'll still try to personally answer if I have contact information for you, or else answer it next week. And I'm easy to reach, george@guitars.com. I have a question. Jim F. asks, what is your opinion of the Martin D40 FMG? And it's a flamed quilted mahogany model, Martin D40. So it's a dreadnought size, beautifully figured quilted mahogany. And he says he has a 1995 number 108 of 150. Well, it was a limited edition. And Martin has made many limited edition models. Quilted mahogany can have beautiful grain. Most people think of mahogany as having a very uniform grain without any fancy figuring, but the fact is standard recent grown mahogany can have beautiful figure in some cases, and some of the old growth virgin forest wood, and including some of the sinker mahogany wood, has pretty gorgeous figure. It can rival almost any curly maple or curly koa. So far as does it sound notably different, and the answer is not especially. If it's old growth, dense wood, it's going to sound really, really good whether it has highly figured grain or not. But the highly figured mahogany in general is dense, heavy, old growth wood, and that is beautiful to look at, and in general also extremely good sounding. So that is something notable. And a limited edition guitar such as the D40 FMG would be a fine instrument. I got a question from John H. Asking about boutique guitars by a variety of makers that may sell in the $5,000 to $6,000 range versus, say, a Martin D28 for half the price, and how do they stack up? Well, in general, I think that the new Martins deliver excellent bang for the buck. but each model differs. For example, the sinker mahogany models that we sell, and some of the new that we've just introduced rosewood models, some of which you can see right behind me that I'll talk about soon, I think stack up to offerings by other makers that may cost twice as much. But that's going to be a matter of personal preference, because certainly makers such as Collings, Santa Cruz, Bourgeois make fine guitars. And each maker has instruments that are really rather distinctive in sound. Even when they may look a lot like a Martin, they often sound different. And in many cases, the maker actually is looking for something a bit different. It used to be if people got a Dreadnought guitar, you could pretty well assume they were playing country or bluegrass. That's not so much true anymore. There are people who want a Dreadnought that may be waist a little lighter and may be responsive for finger picking, which is not really what Martin had in mind originally when the model was designed. But the fact is, you sure enough can do finger picking on a Dreadnought. But Santa Cruz is not necessarily aiming for the exact same sound as a Martin, nor for that matter really is Collings or Bourgeois. Their clientele is different. They're not necessarily hardcore bluegrass players, and they're looking for something different. But when it comes right down to it, I find that a regular new HD28 Martin and a regular new D18 Martin they're really good guitars. And the custom shop versions that we have with Adirondack spruce and some featuring sinker mahogany are, in my opinion, better yet. But Martin guitars have a long tradition. Since 1833, they know how to make good ones. And the guitars they make are uniformly very good, and in their price bracket are very competitive. But comparing different brands is going to be a matter of personal preference. But I would certainly say that I feel that the custom shop models that we are offering give extraordinary bang for the buck. Rob Mend asks if I have any opinion about Britt Kelly's guitars made with centuries-old white pine, and the answer is no, I don't. And that's going to be my standard answer on any guitars that I have not personally played. If I am asked about a maker that I have not personally encountered any examples of his work, I don't have a valid opinion. Certainly, centuries-old white pine could be very good if it's old growth wood, lots of grain lines per inch. There's no reason to suppose that that wood would not be capable of giving a fine sound. And it is remarkable how different old growth, well-aged wood can be from recently harvested wood of the same species, but grown under different growing conditions. As a lot of you know, that Nashville was hit with a bomb on 2nd Avenue on Christmas Day, and many buildings were damaged. I have a friend who's a structural engineer, and he's been in and out of those buildings, and they've done stress tests on lumber samples to see what they need to replace a damaged beam. And what they find is some of those old beams are 5 times as strong or more than a sample of wood taken from a lumber yard today, often enough of the same species, but sometimes the same species isn't as readily available. Some of the beams in some of those buildings on Lower Broadway and 2nd Avenue where the bomb went off are poplar, but that's wood that was cut back in the 1800s. And The modern wood that you can get, structural lumber that you buy, is quite different and is not as strong. So they have had to do interesting adjustments to make the renovations work. At any rate, the quality of the wood alone is not going to make for a great guitar. It has to be a well-designed guitar with great workmanship. If you have a maker who does excellent design work or copies something that was of excellent design, uses excellent materials and has excellent workmanship, then it should sound good. But certainly centuries old white pine that is structurally strong has no reason why it couldn't sound good or even great under the right circumstances. Thomas Van Tilburg asks, are there any manufacturers that produce an electric hollow body guitar similar to the Gibson L4 or L5 with an Adirondack spruce top? So far as I know, at present, no. Would it make a big difference on an electric guitar, whether you had Adirondack versus Sitka? Probably not nearly as much difference as it would make on an acoustic arch top with a thinner, more responsive top than you would put on an electric. On the Gruhn model electrics that we do that are hollow except under the pickups, when we do spruce tops, we are typically using Sitka, which works very well in that capacity. And they sound notably different from the ones that have a carved maple top. But do I really think that putting Adirondack would make a big difference on an electric guitar? The answer is no, not especially. We have a question from Bob. How's the supply of sinker mahogany holding up? And the answer is pretty good. It's not something that's being replenished since the wood was cut between 1880 and 1920, and every time a log is pulled up, that's some less than are in the river, but they're still finding more. Not every part of the river has been equally well explored, and sometimes when there's spring floods, they have a wet season and a dry season. It's still tropical, but so it doesn't freeze, but they do have seasonal changes in humidity that are considerable, and flooding can expose stuff that was buried before under silt, and therefore the supply is likely to be good for some years to come. I don't anticipate running out of sinker mahogany in the coming 5, and probably not even in the coming 10 years. Beyond that, I'd have to say it's probably debatable. We had a question from Scott Richardson about Lowden guitars that we are selling. And yes, we are now selling new Lowden guitars made in Northern Ireland. They are very good. They're listed on our website. And I don't think I can say more than that for the moment. If you want to find out about the Lowden guitars, of course, Lowden has their own website. We have the ones listed on our website that we have for sale. And obviously, if you call, we're happy to talk about them. Jeffrey asks, on the acoustic guitar, is there really any difference between scallop braces and scallop tone bars other than where they are placed in a guitar? Do you have any preference as to how they are scalloped and where they are placed on a Dreadnought guitar? Well, it's hard to beat the regular Martin bracing pattern for that design guitar. But bracing shape and mass certainly does matter, but you can have bracing that is scalloped by cutting some out of the center part and having it almost look like a suspension bridge where it's just up and down and then back up. Or you can give it a more knife edge so that in cross section, instead of being like that, it's more like that, scooped. And you can get a remarkably similar result. The fact is that almost anything you do to change an acoustic guitar, positioning of the braces, the weight of the brace, the composition of the brace. For example, Larson used laminated braces with a rosewood or ebony center. And so spruce, spruce, and ebony. And they sound different from a Martin or a Gibson. Bracing placement matters. Martin did the so-called forward shifted bracing where the main X crossed very close to the edge of the sound hole until late 38. And then they went to the rear shifted where the X crossed a little further back. And they sound subtly different, but you can get a good sound either way. But some of the absolute classic, most sought after Martins are the ones with the so-called forward shifted scalloped bracing. But it still makes a big difference. What is the ratio, the mass of braces to the mass of top, how thick the top is, how thick the braces are, what species of wood is used. And almost anything you change can produce a difference, and also in conjunction with body size, body shape, wood on the back and sides. It all works together as a system. And it comes out that there are so many variables that it's hard to give straight answers to what any one of them did, other than to be for sure everything you change does something. I had a question about Martin style 00 and 0045 guitars. So hang on a second, let me just find one. Here we go, right here. Here be a Martin style 45, made in 1922, slot head, torch, snowflakes, pyramid end bridge, no pick guard, because in 22 they didn't. Abalone around the sound hole, you know, it goes on the top around the edge of the fingerboard and around the edges of the top. It has abalone trim on the sides, all the way around by the end strip there, and on the back. And it has the multicolor, nice axe stripe, Brazilian rosewood. 1922 would be a mahogany neck, ebony fingerboard, ebony bridge, Adirondack spruce. Now this is a single O, but a double O would look exactly the same, with the exception that a single O is 13½ inches wide at the lower bout, and a double O would be 14 1/8 at the lower bout on a 12 fret and 14 5/8 on a 14 fret model. The triple O came out around 1905 and looked basically like this, but 15 inches wide, but otherwise would have the same ornamentation. By 1930, they were starting to use the belly bridge, the more modern design bridge, and a pick guard. But they still would have looked essentially like this, 12 fret. And then for the double O 45, it stayed 12 fret throughout its existence. But the triple O model in 1934, triple O 45 was a 14 fret model. And they actually didn't make very many 12 fret triple O's after 1930. The OM model, which was a 14 fret guitar, came out in late 29 and had the basic same body width, 15 inches, but was a 14 fret guitar with a solid peg head. Style 45 was Martin's absolute top of the line. And these are some of the most sought after guitars ever made by Martin or any other maker of flat top guitars. But the quality of this single O is the exact same quality, workmanship and materials and ornamentation as if you had a Dreadnought or a triple O. But you can get a style 45 in single O, double O, triple O, OM, D, pretty much any size Martin made, could be ordered with a variety of levels of ornamentation and materials, and style 45 was the top of the line going back to about 1902. Prior to that, they didn't do style 45s, they did 42s that had the abalone trim on the top, but not on the back and sides, but also even going back into the 1800s, there were custom order guitars, some of which were even fancier than this. So they didn't have a standard catalog model, but they were custom order. But style 45 is Martin's top of the line, or at least it was. Now they make some things that are fancier. They have D50 and D100 and custom order things with much more elaborate ornamentation. But more elaborate ornamentation doesn't make them better necessarily. This was Martin's absolute top level workmanship available at the time this guitar was made, 1922. And it is a very fine instrument. At that time, these were designed for gut strings. It'll hold silk steel quite well, but I wouldn't put anything even as heavy as regular acoustic light gauge steel on this. Nothing heavier than extra lights. But you get to like 1927 onward, the majority of these were braced for steel, and they are exceedingly fine guitars. So SC, your custom shop Martin Sinker mahogany guitars have standard thickness tops where they slightly thinner. They are basically the original specs are from the golden era guitars, which were a slightly thinner top, but not dramatically thin. So the thickness of the top is quite similar to what you would have on the vintage series Martins. And, we also find that an exceedingly thin top does not project as well. Some of the finest guitars, like the Ds and triple Os of the 30s with the scalloped forward shifted X bracing, are not the lightest weight guitars, but they are the ones that project the best. So what we have opted for is slightly thinner, but not dramatically so. Michael O'Neill says, how do you see the valuation behaving for vintage acoustic instruments in the short and long term, 2 to 10 years? Well, let's see what the crystal ball has to say. It used to be I didn't have a crystal ball to answer these questions, but now we do. And look what it has to say. When you look through the crystal ball, what it does tell you is our world has been turned upside down. But if you look close, if you hold something real close to it, like this, that comes out right side up. But if you take it away, all of a sudden, it's upside down. So what it tells me is that we have a pretty clear view of what's going on right now. But so far as 10 years in the future, it's tough. In fact, like I mentioned at the start of today's session, look at how much has changed in the past week. Our political scene is radically different. Predictions about what's going to happen to the economy are just all over the place. And at the beginning of 2002, did I anticipate that some electric guitar prices would go up tenfold in a period of under 3 years? No. But from late '02 through late 2006, some models went up very dramatically, some more than others, but a Les Paul Jr., it would have been $3,000 at maybe $3,500 at the beginning or middle of 2002. By late '06 could be $15,000, except that the bubble popped around 2008, and prices now are way less than they were then. And 2006, ooh, that was 15 years ago. So prognostication is not as good as hindsight. The crystal ball seems to only tell me that things are upside down, and it's very difficult to predict. What I do predict is that the true golden era models that are great instruments, and golden era is not simply 1 year, it's for each maker, it's a different period. You know, for Jimmy DeQuisto, it would be some of his last ones. For D'Angelico, it would be. For Stromberg, it would be some of the last. And for individual luthiers, it may be their most recent guitars, but for a lot of companies that have been around for 100 years or more, they could have had a golden era. Martin's making some great guitars right now, but they're not better than what they made in 1937 or 38. But it's remarkable how close they're getting. And they're way better than what Martin made 50 years ago. They're good enough that I'm very proud to be handling, especially models that are custom ordered to our specs, but even the standard line Martins, they're very good guitars. And the same can be said for Collings and Santa Cruz, Huss and Dalton, and Bourgeois, and numerous others. There's a lot of makers out there. There are more makers producing quality guitars today than ever before in the history of the instrument. But I still have a great fondness for Martins, and that happens to be our primary brand here. But I'm proud to be handling the new Lowdens, which are also extremely good. They're a different flavor. We have a couple of the Lowdens that have come in that I'm personally very fond of. And I would have to say that, yes, they are as good as some of my custom Martins, but they're different. They have a different response, they're a different flavor, and it depends on your personal preference. But Martin's not alone in making good guitars. And there are numerous makers of electric guitars as well. But you have to try things out and see for yourself what suits you. But at any rate, I would say that in the coming 10 years, there's going to be another major shift, and that is that the baby boomers are going to be pretty much gone from the market. And they've been the ones controlling a lot of the vintage market for the past 50 years or more. I'm 75 years old now. I have no intention of retiring as long as I'm physically and mentally able to do it. And my great uncle Otto lived to be 105, but his sister Emma only got to 102, but neither one of them retired. They weren't in the musical instrument business, but they did not retire. And they were very actively involved in business. But baby boomers are no longer going to be the driving force in the vintage market 10 years from now. We are losing customers in that area. They're either getting arthritic or senile or just plain dead. And I intend to go on as long as I can, like I said, but it's going to depend to a large extent on what instruments appeal to people who 10 years from now will be at their peak of earnings and perhaps going through their midlife crisis like baby boomers did in the mid-'80s, which drove the price up then when baby boomers had their midlife crisis and bought little red sports cars, tennis and racquetball equipment, guitars and other toys. Generations of people in the future will do that sort of thing too. So if you want to know what might be the hot item 10 years from now, you might look at what today's 30-year-olds grew up wanting but couldn't afford, and right now are busy working their fingers to the bone, but 10 years from now, they might be more settled and financially secure. And what will they do to indulge themselves if they have a midlife crisis? Or 20 years from now, what to today's 20-year-olds really aspire to own but can't afford? Maybe 20 years from now, when they are 40, they'll be able to afford. And maybe that's what will be the hot item then. And that's true of more than just guitars. At any rate, the crystal ball doesn't answer all, but that's sort of the basic thoughts I have on that subject. There's a question. As a person over 65 with arthritis, what, if any, advantage can be realized by using guitars like Zager's easy play guitars versus searching near and far? Well, I don't know that Zager has any special thing that makes a guitar easier to play. Most any guitar, if it has a decent proportion neck, can be set up to have good action. If it has good action and good intonation and use the right strings, it ought to be comfortable to play. And there's no one brand that has any lock on that. We have something I'd like to show now, because I had been mentioning a bit about sinker mahogany guitars, and I think most of the people listening in today are aware that we have guitars with sinker mahogany in 14 fret D, 14 fret quadruple O, 12 fret quadruple O, and OM, and also 12 string with Adirondack non-torrified tops. But we now have something new. And right now will be the first time it's being announced. They're not yet on our list, but they will be tonight. And what we have is guitars with style 28 herringbone ornamentation in 12 fret D, 14 fret D, 14 fret quadruple O, and OM. And I will show what they look like because they are right up there behind me. We've gotten in samples of all except the 12 fret quad, and we may have those as soon as next week, but we have the others here right now, and I can show what they look like. This is the 12 fret D, slot head, square slots, vintage style. Individual tuners, similar to what Martin would have done in the early 30s. So the slotted diamond inlays, herringbone trim, high grade, good quality, non-torrefied Adirondack, which in my opinion gives the best sound. Indian rosewood, zigzag backstripe. Indian rosewood, while it doesn't look exactly like Brazilian, so far as sound, in my opinion, does every bit as well or better than Madagascar, and actually is a very fine sounding wood. Herman Hauser, whose classical guitars today would bring like $150,000 plus for Herman Hauser first. Used Indian rosewood as well as Brazilian on his classicals and charged exactly the same price for either one. You can see the finish is nice and shiny, it reflects. But it is a fine quality guitar. And the 14 fret D, we will be selling for $4,350 with the heavy duty vintage style guide case. But that's what the 14 fret D will be. The 12 fret D will be $45.75. So this one is $45.75. 14 fret D, same wood, same ornamentation, solid peg head, still slotted diamond, basically the same type ornamentation as you would have had on a 1937 D28, and forward shifted scallop bracing. And so the top wood is basically, and the bracing pattern is the vintage style. And these are a different sound from the sinkers. It's not a matter of good versus bad. It's the sinker mahogany is great. It's a bit brighter sounding. This is a bit darker sounding. But so far as volume, tonal quality, these are very fine guitars. And this model, the 14 fret D, is $43.50. We have the 14 fret quadrupolo. And this is 16 inches wide, same wood, same ornamentation, $4,250 in natural. And we will be getting in sunbursts. It will cost a little bit more, but they are on order and have not yet arrived. But distinctly different sound from the D, but equally good. OM, notice that the OM pick guard is a little smaller. That's the traditional OM early style pick guard. The type of pick guard is what came in 29. And same wood, same workmanship. All of these have a 25.4 scale. And this is the same quality guitar as the quad or the D. And this is also in natural finish with case 4250. So, it's something, it's a project I've had in mind for some time. I'm pleased to have them. In fact, I'm very pleased to have them. But we'll have the 12 fret quads here shortly. And also sunbursts will be following. And we have a good stock. But our initial order of all the variations combined was for 100 guitars. So this is something that we take quite seriously. I would not place an order like that if I did not expect it to do well and if I did not think that they were really truly great instruments. They are fine guitars, and I'm very, very pleased to have them. But if you have questions, obviously, we're easy to reach. A question from John Adcox that his brother died unexpectedly in May and has a large guitar collection. And he's not sure what temperature, humidity, how to store them properly. And the answer is, if you're not going to play them for a good while, slack the strings at least partially. They should not have much string tension on them unless you're going to be using them for, if they're going to be a year or more, months on end, that they're not going to be played. Loosen the strings, keep the temperature close to normal room temperature. Certainly over 50 degrees and under 80 degrees, and humidity anywhere from 45 to 50% is truly ideal. And beyond that, there's nothing particularly special that you have to do to store them. They should be just about as good as being in suspended animation. If you keep them at that kind of temperature and humidity, and with very little string tension on them, you should have no problems with them. Edward Hype says he has a 1930 OM28 with a 1 7/8 inch wide nut width and a soft V-shaped neck. Have I ever heard one with a wide nut like that? And the answer is, I have not seen one like that. However, if you send me the serial number, I can check and find out about the specs on that particular guitar. Send me that information to george@guitars.com, and I will check it out and get back to you to find out what Martin's records show on that particular instrument. Jimmy says, I have been fascinated by stories about what I call super guitars. For example, the Les Paul, known as the Phoenix, lost in a plane crash, only to be reunited with and played by Peter Frampton 20 years later, and Tony Rice in his Martin D28, which was reported to be lost and recovered twice, shot, submerged in floodwaters, but used extensively by Tony up to his recent passing. Can you possibly share a similar such story? Well, Peter Frampton's guitar was a very highly modified instrument. It started out originally as a 2-pickup guitar. It was made before humbucking pickups were used on the Les Paul Custom. It had the Alnico 5 rhythm pickup and a P90 lead pickup, and Peter had 3 pickups put in. The guitar suited him. He loves it. Is there any special reason why it should sound better than others? The answer is no. And I think basically gets down to he likes it. That's great. But is it necessarily the best sounding of the model? I think it just happens it suits him personally. And I'll say much the same for the guitar that Tony Rice had that used to belong to Clarence White. It had been very highly reworked. It had a new neck. The top had been thinned down a bit. The sound hole had been enlarged, and it was so thoroughly reworked that it was hardly even a pre-war D28 by the time he got through so many changes. It suited him. Actually, Clarence White didn't play it much. It was highly revered because it had been Clarence's, but when Clarence had it, the action was extremely high. He didn't use it for any lead work at all. He didn't use it for much recording. He primarily played his 1950s D18. There's a lot of mystique around those guitars, but were they actually better guitars? I think that's debatable. But having guitars submerged in a flood does not do good things for them. And in the case of most acoustics, if they've been in flood water for very long, they're falling apart and they are either impossible to restore or exceedingly difficult. But so far as them going together to routinely be better than they were before, absolutely not. There may be a few freak examples where the owner thinks it came out great, but if it came out sounding better than it did before, it's probably because it wasn't in good adjustment before and got a real master to put it back together and they set it up really well. But don't stick your guitars underwater hoping that they're going to get better. Sinker mahogany is a different matter. Those logs were underwater, but it wasn't the guitar underwater, it was logs underwater, and the sap would flow to the outer perimeter of the log, and the interior aged well and could be dried out, but later, but it could be used. But if you submerge a guitar in water, that is not a good thing to do. And Ed says, can you explain to us the bracing inside of guitars as to their structural component, tone, and volume effects, and the nuances of shaved bracing styles and overall value of a luthier performing this customization to a guitar for tone or volume improvement? In general, it's a great idea to have a skilled luthier do carefully proportioned bracing when they build a guitar. That does not mean it's an equally great idea to do it after the fact. When you're building a guitar, you're sculpting those braces before the guitar is assembled, and you have good access to it and good manual control over what you're doing. You're not working through the sound hole and fumbling around blind. You can't do the same quality work working through the sound hole of a finished guitar. Plus, if you have a guitar of significant value, when you modify it often enough, you're taking a risk. It may sound better and it may not, but it will not increase in value. And if anything, it's more likely to decrease in value because you do that work. Don't do it to guitars that are vintage with vintage value. In fact, in general, it's just not a very good idea to do it after the fact. If something is really poorly made and you have a really skilled luthier who says he can fix it and the guitar does not have collector's item value, fine, let him experiment a bit, but don't do it on a collectible guitar. And don't do it on any guitar expecting that its value is going to be enhanced so far as resale value at a later date. Gary Saunders asks, what is your opinion of the HD28V? That's a model that they're not making anymore, but it's actually very similar specs to the brand new HD28, the exception that the HD28V has ivoroid grained binding, and the new one has uniform color, but it's a ivory white. It's not dead white like a refrigerator. It's a more ivory color, and it's actually a remarkably similar guitar. It's a good guitar. So it also depends on the age. The new ones have an adjustable truss rod, and the one Martin's made prior to 1985 do not have an adjustable truss rod. But the brand new HD28 actually compares very well in quality to the HD28V. Robert Valacourse, what is your brand and age recommendation for a banjo to be used in a recording studio? I think that's just too generalized a question to give you a good straight answer. Nothing beats a pre-World War II flathead master tone for bluegrass, but then you're talking about a banjo that can be $50,000 or more. If you're playing clawhammer, there's some brand new banjos that are just wonderful. Ohm makes great ones. The early old Vegas and Fairbanks are great. And there are new makers, such as even one in Nashville called the Nashville Banjo Company, that are making banjos specifically designed for clawhammer playing that are just wonderful sounding. And it depends on the type of music and your budget, but there are a variety of good banjos. Gibson is no longer making banjos. That could change in the future, but they're not making banjos now. But the older Gibsons are the most sought after bluegrass banjos ever. But there's other makers today like Huber that make a very good banjo. So feel free to call me or email me and I can go more into detail. But Rich G says, I've noticed a jump in quality used guitar values recently. What do you believe is causing this trend? You see this trend continuing? Well, frankly, not everything's gone up. Some things have gone up, but my experience is that primo grade collectibles are bringing very good prices on acoustics, as much as they ever did. Some of the electrics are not bringing as much now as they did in 2006. But Sunburst Les Pauls have kept their value just fine. But if you have a 1956 Gold Top Les Paul, which is a great guitar, they were bringing as much as $80,000 in 2006, and they're not doing that now. So I'm not quite sure what you've been seeing, but do all guitars always go up? No. And even in times when some are going up, does that mean all models are going up? No. So there's certainly a demand for Sunburst Les Pauls, for really nice pre-World War II, especially Dreadnought and 000 size. And there's a demand for good ES335s and Stratocasters and Telecasters. But are the Tellies bringing more money now than they did even 15 years ago? No, they're really not. Some of the highest prices I've ever seen were back early 2007. So Kirk Furmeister, what is your opinion on Chinese copies of Martin and other US makers? Any chance that the fancier ones could become future collectibles? Well, I haven't seen any Chinese guitars yet that I thought would be future collectibles, but I'm seeing some that are darn good. And I've already commented in previous sessions about, for example, the Altamira guitars that made in China, copies of Selmer, and they do some very nice classicals. Am I holding my breath waiting for them to be collectible? No, but are they really good? Yeah, they're good. And I cannot say what's going to happen 10 years or 20 years from now. 10 years from now, I'd be 85. And do I know what the market's going to be like when I'm 85 or 95 years old? The answer is no. And I know what it used to be. I can go back year by year for many years and tell you how it's changed from year to year. But what I find is it's not been a steady climb. It's been periods of up, periods of plateau, some periods when it actually dropped. And where it's going from here depends on the demographics of the market. It depends on the economy overall. And as you know, just even in the last week, the amount of political upheaval worldwide, and certainly within the United States, has been vast. Do I know what's going to happen in the coming 10 years? My crystal ball doesn't tell me that. If you got one that does, I sure wish I could buy it. Robert Sherman asks, what are the main sonic differences between an all mahogany parlor guitar and a mahogany parlor with a spruce top? Well, basically, it doesn't have to be a parlor size to try to answer that. A mahogany top is not going to give the dynamic range of a spruce top. It's going to give a somewhat more trebly sound, a rather bluesy sound. You can get a pretty good sound on some mahogany top guitars, but Martin's guitars that they made with mahogany tops were less expensive guitars than ones they did with spruce. For example, the style 15 and 17 had mahogany tops, and styles 18 on up had spruce tops, except for a few that were done with koa tops. And spruce is still considered spruce, or some other makers may use cedar, and spruce can be Adirondack, it can be Sitka, it can be Engelmann. Each spruce sounds a bit different, but in general, spruce is the preferred top for most acoustic players. And it does give greater dynamic range, and I think just greater depth, it's greater clarity. On a parlor size guitar, a mahogany top is likely to be a pretty quiet instrument compared to what the same size guitar could do with a spruce top. So I have another question that came in from a Dave Wickman, who's asking about production of Gibson J-50 guitars from 1941 through 47. And Joe Spann, who works with me on appraisals, has studied Gibson history for well over 40 years and has a tremendous amount of information from their shipping ledgers and work order ledgers. Work order numbers are helpful, as are shipping ledger notices, but they're not perfect. Shipping ledgers, for example, for the J-50, they're informative, but they're not the ultimate only authority, because over time they were kept by a variety of individual employees, each with their own style of how they would enter. Some clerks made detailed entries, others recorded only the minimum amount they could get away with. And some instruments that were sold direct from the factory don't appear in the shipping ledgers at all. But the factory work order numbers typically represent a minimum for each work order unit of 40 units at that time. Some batches as many as 80, but usually 40. Using only factory work order numbers, you'd expect that instruments in a batch, there were from 41 through 47, there were about 440 guitars, likely 11 batches times 40 in a batch, but still we don't know of any batch numbers recorded in shipping ledgers from 46 or 47. And we do know that in 46 and 7, a lot of them were not ink stamped at all with work order numbers, so there's no record of them. The record keeping during the war was not so good. And so the estimating how many were made by work order numbers is approximate. But at any rate, there were 11 work order batches that were recorded in that time. But you're still up against the fact that there were times when they just weren't recording accurately. So there were no known work order batches in 46 or 47. The shipping totals, there were none recorded in 41, but they could have been started then. The first recorded shipments were 103 shipments during 42, with the first being June 1st of 42. And 43, there were only 42 shipments recorded, 44 none, 45 none, 46 none, 47, 121 recorded, but that's not definitive proof that they didn't make or didn't even sell some during periods when they recorded nothing, because their ledgers were less than perfect. So basically, just because no J-50s were recorded in the shipping ledgers doesn't mean they weren't produced and shipped. For example, shipping ledgers do not record any shipments of factory work order numbers for J-50s in year 46, yet we know they exist based on just looking at the guitars and seeing their specs. And they have all the characteristics of other Gibson models from 46 with no factory work order number, no made. They don't have the only Gibson's Good Enough banner. They have the script Gibson logo, but no banner logo that you typically see on wartime guitars. But some of these things just don't appear in the ledgers. So that can be an issue. So far as, let's see, some other questions. Earl, and I mentioned this last week, asked about China's Eastern guitar companies' quality compared to South Korea's Peerless. And I'm not even sure at this point that Peerless is still in business, but I can say that Easterns are plenty good. I've got some new questions that just came in. Thomas Van Tilburg, is there any literature available that he can read to study and learn about the different types of bracing used in the building of guitars? I would suggest on that to join the Guild of American Luthiers and the Association of Stringed Instrument Artisans, both of which have publications as well as magazine. And you can get quite a bit of information, including blueprints from the Guild of American Luthiers, as well as some of the folks affiliated with the Association of Stringed Instrument Artisans, which goes by the acronym ASIA. So that's one you can do. Kevin Fitzpatrick says purchasing a guitar is such a tactile experience, picking up and putting down multiple guitars before you begin to have a feel. I remember when I bought my first guitar at your shop, it was a weekend affair, coming in and out, listening to a number of people play the guitar before ever pulling the trigger to buy it. How has COVID impacted the shop and your business model? Do you see things changing post-COVID? Well, yes, it is a problem that fewer people feel safe coming in. We are open to the public, but we limit it to 4 customers at a time in the showroom downstairs and 2 at a time upstairs. Most of our business is either by appointment, people coming in, or it's online. But when they say online, they're not just point and click, you can. But typically people call, they have lots of questions, they want extra photos or more info, particularly if it's a vintage instrument where not all are equal in sound or condition or setup. We do a lot of setup work on guitars to make sure every guitar that we're selling is set up properly. So unless specified otherwise, we have checked it out and it plays well. But fact is, yeah, we anticipate that post-COVID, we're going to have more people in the showroom again. We certainly are getting not even half as many people through the showroom as we used to, but our sales volume is way better than just half of what it used to be. Is the volume as good as it was immediately post-COVID? No. Is it close? Yes. But we're working our butt off to do it, and we do work to provide a very high quality service. Michael Frost, I've been playing an M36 purchased by my fiance at your shop in 2008. I've been experimenting with different gauge string choices and wonder if you have any best fit recommendations. I'm normally a medium gauge guy. In general, for an M size, which is what I call quadruple O, that Martin calls M, but on the custom shop, I can call them what I want. I think they're quadruple O. They're the same shape as single O, double O, triple O, except they're an inch bigger than a triple O, therefore they ought to be a quadruple O. And why Martin came up with the M designation in the 70s when they introduced that, I don't know, but the original M was basically the same size and shape as the pre-World War II size F archtop, which they didn't make any flat top versions in that size. But the F models were made from 1935 through 42. Medium gauge strings is what I think is perfect for the quadruple O, or what Martin calls an M. But you can certainly try it with light, but I think you'll get the best optimum sound with medium on that size 16-inch wide guitar. It also makes quite a difference sometimes, brand of strings. I really like the Martin strings. Martin makes their own strings. They have their own string winding equipment, and they actually do make their own. They're not just made by a major other manufacturer and then prepackaged with a Martin logo on the package. Martin really does make them. But again, there's also the choice of bronze strings, nickel wrapped strings. There's multiple options, but so far as I'm concerned, the Martin Authentic series, or they have some that are coated that give a longer lifetime. Martin strings overall are very good, but D'Addario makes great strings too. And DR makes good strings as well. And I find some guitars sound great with DRs, better with DRs than with D'Addarios. And some guitars sound great with D'Addarios. And individual guitars don't all react exactly the same. You can try a few brands and see which one suits you, but there are differences. John Parsons asked, Grover open-back ears, is there any good reason to pay more for the Waverleys or Schaller Grand Tunes? Well, the new Grovers are Asian made, and frankly, they're good for what they cost, but they're not on the level of Waverleys or Schallers. Schaller has some new sort of vintage style open-back tuners that look remarkably like the pre-World War II Grovers. And we are using those on our new ones right behind me that I just showed earlier, the guitars with the rosewood back and sides and the Adirondack tops and herringbone trim. I'm very proud of those guitars, and they have Schallers on them. Waverleys cost more. None of the gears are better than the Waverleys, but I find that the Schallers tune extremely well. They cost less and they work extremely well. But Grover gears are still remarkably good for the price, but they don't cost anywhere near as much as the Waverleys and not as much as the Schallers. And to some extent, you do get what you pay for. Rick G asks, what advantage in performance is there with torification? I've been through this numerous times, and I do not see any advantage in torification. Personally, I don't like it. And I feel that it gives less dynamic range and a less rich harmonic response. All the custom guitars we order specifically do not have torified wood. And, if I thought torified wood was superior, I would have specified it. But I specifically go out of my way to specify not torified on all of the models that are custom ordered by us. And we are about to wrap up. David asks, besides the pick guard, what are the differences between a Martin O model and a Martin OM model? The answer to that question is scale length. A Martin OM has a 25.4 inch scale. The modern Martin O's and Martin O's made after late 1938 have a 24.9 inch scale for the 14 fret O's. The 12 fret early O's had a 25.4 scale, which is the same as the Dreadnought and same as the OM model that came out in late 29. When Martin decided to try a 14 fret neck on a guitar, the OM was their answer. And basically they took the 12 fret O and pretty much just shortened the body on the upper bout by 2 fret lengths. And so it gives it a slightly shorter body, a slightly different shape on the upper bout, but they kept the same 25.4 scale that the 12 fretter had. Then the OM did very well on sales, so that Martin decided that since the 12 fret O sales were plunging, not selling so well anymore, today people like them, but back then they were not selling so well. People wanted the new 14 fret model. They discontinued the 12 fret O and they renamed the OM O because it was still the same body width, but it still stayed 25.4. And it was 25.4 till late 34. And in late 34, Martin made a change, not simply of scale length, but also fret style. The guitars made by Martin prior to late 1934 did not have a steel reinforcement rod in the neck. And that worked fine for gut strings. The bar frets permitted them to do compression fretting, and they actually had slightly different width graduated frets that they could adjust any warps in the neck. They could give it a little back bow, or they could do whatever they needed. If there was a hump in a neck somewhere, just with compression fretting, they could fix it. And that's what Martin did from their earliest days with CF Senior, right on up through late 34. But with the advent of steel strings on most of their guitars, they beefed up the bracing a little bit. They thickened the top a little bit, but the bar frets, which worked just great with gut strings, were not doing quite so well when people started using strings as heavy as medium gauge steel. And some of the people were using even heavier gauges. Martin decided that they would put in a steel reinforcement rod. And also, simultaneously with the steel T-bar, they used standard frets. They no longer needed to do compression fretting, and most people liked the feel of the modern T frets better. They just were smoother, easier to work with. You could just get a smoother feel to them. So they made that change. Anyway, OM models are still popular today, especially with a lot of finger pickers. But the new OMs we have sound great flat picked or finger picked. They're very, very good guitars. But basically, what's the difference between a new Martin OM versus a new Martin triple O with the same ornamentation? The answer is the OM has a smaller pick guard, the old style pick guard, and has the 25.4 scale, and the triple O has the 24.9 scale. We've covered lots of territory. There's a few that I'll try to answer individually or get to next week. But till then, have a good one. And as I've noted in the past week, we've had a heck of a lot of change going on in the USA and around the world. I anticipate the coming week and the coming month, and for that matter, the coming year will be plenty interesting. We'll see most people getting their COVID vaccine this year, not necessarily in the coming week, but so far as political scene, we'll see change even in a week. On the economic scene, we're already seeing that the stock market is gyrating a bit. So when you ask how much our guitar is going to be worth in 10 years, aside from the fact that my crystal ball only says the world's upside down, ask a stockbroker what the stock market's going to be in 10 years. And if he really thinks he knows, or if he acts like he knows, I wouldn't trust him. Because the fact is, if he really knew, he wouldn't be needing to peddle stocks to you. He'd already be a trillionaire. And markets are notoriously difficult to predict, and past performance does not guarantee similar patterns for the future. Some things may be cyclical, others are not. But with the guitar market, we do know that the baby boomers are aging up and out. New generation is coming in. I did explain. You want to know what's going to be popular 20 years from now? Look at what today's 20-year-olds can't afford, but maybe will want when they have more money. But they might also want something not the identical one. They might want what in psychological animal behavior terms is a supernormal stimulus. Like you give a seagull choice of its own egg or one that's the same shape, painted just like it, put next to it, but it's twice as big. They'll pick the bigger, better one, up to twice as big, but beyond twice as big, it doesn't look right to them. But up to twice as big, they'll abandon their own egg and sit on the new wooden egg that looks bigger and better. And guitars could be that way too. And when D45s weren't fancy enough for the baby boomers having a midlife crisis, Martin made D50s and later D100s. Anyway, till next week, have a good one.